The diner's neon sign flickered, casting a red glow over the cracked pavement outside. Ethan's heart pounded as he slid into the booth. His eyes locked on the man across from him, Liam. The one person who made the world feel safe again. But safety was a lie, and the truth was about to shatter everything. Ethan, 25, had spent years clawing his way out of the suffocating grip of his mother, Diane. Her love was a barbed wire cage, conditional, sharp, and impossible to escape without bleeding. Growing up in the small town of Willow Creek, Pennsylvania, Ethan learned early that being gay was a sin in her eyes, a flaw to be fixed with screamed prayers and locked doors. By 18, he'd cut her off, fleeing to Philadelphia with nothing but a backpack and a heart full of scars. Therapy with Dr. Mark Reynolds, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes, had been his lifeline, pulling him from the edge of despair. But now, 7 years later, a single text from his estranged mother had reopened every wound. "I'm dating someone new. You'd like him. His name's Mark." The coincidence was a gut punch. Ethan's fingers trembled as he set his phone down, the diner's hum of clinking plates and low chatter fading into a dull roar. Liam, 26, reached across the table, his calloused hand brushing Ethan's. "You okay?" he asked, his voice a steady anchor. Ethan wanted to lie, to say he was fine, but the words caught in his throat. How could he explain that the man who'd helped him rebuild his life might now be sleeping in his mother's bed? Liam's green eyes searched Ethan's face, reading the panic he couldn't hide. They'd been together for 2 years, their love a quiet rebellion against the world's cruelty. Liam, a mechanic with a laugh that could thaw any winter, had grown up in foster care, his own scars a map of survival. He understood Ethan's pain without needing the full story, but this was different. Ethan forced a smile, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's her. She's back." Diane had always been a storm, her rage unpredictable and her apologies fleeting. Ethan remembered nights spent hiding in his closet, her voice thundering through the walls as she blamed him for her unhappiness. "You're broken," she'd spit, her words carving into his soul. Therapy with Dr. Reynolds had taught him to see her toxicity for what it was, to forgive himself for the shame she'd planted. But the idea of Mark, his Mark, entangled with her was a betrayal he couldn't process. The diner's door chimed, and Ethan's breath hitched. He half expected Diane to walk in, her presence a specter that haunted every corner of his life. Instead, it was just a tired waitress, her apron stained with coffee. Liam squeezed his hand. "Talk to me. F. What's going on?" Ethan exhaled, the weight of the truth pressing against his ribs. "My mom's new boyfriend. I think he's my old therapist." Liam's brow furrowed, confusion giving way to concern. "The guy who helped you through all that crap?" Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah. And if it's true, I don't know what that means for me. For us." The revelation hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Ethan's mind raced, piecing together memories of Dr. Reynolds' calm voice, his notepad filled with careful notes, the way he'd made Ethan feel seen for the first time. How could that man, the one who'd helped him untangle his mother's poison, now be part of her life? Was it a coincidence, or something darker? Ethan's stomach churned at the thought of Diane manipulating Mark, twisting his compassion into another weapon. Liam leaned closer, his voice low but firm. "We'll figure this out. Together." But Ethan wasn't sure. The past had a way of clawing its way back, and he feared this was only the beginning. He glanced out the window, the neon signs glow blurring in his vision. Somewhere out there, Diane was rebuilding her life. And Mark, his savior, his confidant, was part of it. The question wasn't just how, but why. As the waitress refilled their coffee, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another text from Diane. Come home this weekend. We need to talk. His heart sank. Home was a battlefield, and he'd sworn never to return. But the pull of answers, of confronting the man who'd once saved him, was too strong to ignore. He looked at Liam, whose steady gaze promised they'd face whatever came next. Ethan nodded, a decision forming. He'd go back to Willow Creek. He'd face her, and he'd uncover the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The drive to Willow Creek was a quiet one, the Pennsylvania countryside rolling past in a blur of green and gray. Liam drove, his hand resting on Ethan's knee, a silent reminder of their shared strength. Ethan stared out the window, memories of his childhood home flooding back the creaking porch, the Bible verses taped to his bedroom door, the constant weight of Diane's disapproval. He'd left that life behind, but now it was calling him back, and Mark's name was the bait. They arrived at dusk, the town's single stoplight blinking lazily. Diane's house looked smaller than Ethan remembered, its paint peeling like old skin. He hesitated at the front door, his hand hovering over the bell. Liam stood beside him, a rock in the storm. You don't have to do this, Liam said softly. But Ethan shook his head. He did. For himself, for the boy he'd been, for the man he was still becoming. The door swung open, and there she was, Diane, older but no softer, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Ethan. You came, she said, her voice a mix of surprise and something sharper, something possessive. Behind her, a man stepped into view, his face achingly familiar. Dr. Mark Reynolds, graying at the temples, his smile faltering as he recognized Ethan. The air thickened, the past and present colliding in a single, suffocating moment. Ethan, Mark said, his voice a ghost of the calm it once held. I didn't know you were coming. Ethan's chest tightened, anger and betrayal warring inside him. This was no coincidence. This was a reckoning. The living room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and lavender candles, a cloying mix that made Ethan's stomach turn. Diane gestured to the couch, her smile tight, as if she were playing the role of a gracious host. Ethan sat stiffly, Liam beside him, their shoulders brushing in a silent vow of solidarity. Mark lingered near the doorway, his hands in his pockets, his eyes darting between Ethan and Diane like a man caught in a trap. You didn't tell me he was coming, Mark said to Diane, his tone careful, almost accusatory. Diane waved a hand dismissively, her nails chipped and painted a garish red. I wanted it to be a surprise. Ethan's my son, after all. The word son landed like a slap, and Ethan's jaw clenched. She hadn't earned that title in years. Liam's hand found Ethan's under the table, a grounding touch as the room's tension coiled tighter. Ethan forced himself to meet Mark's gaze. The man looked older than he remembered, his face lined with a weariness that hadn't been there during their sessions. Back then, Mark had been a beacon, guiding Ethan through the fog of his trauma. Now, he was just a man standing in his mother's house, complicit in a story Ethan didn't yet understand. So, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him, how did you two meet? The question was a blade, sharp and deliberate. Diane's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, launching into a rehearsed story about a church fundraiser, a chance encounter, a shared love of old hymns. Mark nodded along, but his eyes told a different story: guilt, maybe, or fear. Ethan wasn't buying it. Diane had never been one for church fundraisers. and Mark had never mentioned religion in their sessions. The pieces didn't fit, and the more Diane talked, the more Ethan's suspicion grew. He glanced at Liam, who gave a subtle nod, urging him to press harder. "That's funny," Ethan said, cutting Diane off mid-sentence. "You never went to church when I was a kid. Said it was full of hypocrites." Diane's eyes flashed, a spark of the old anger Ethan knew too well. "People change, Ethan. You'd know that if you hadn't run off." The barb stung, but Ethan refused to flinch. He turned to Mark, his voice low. "And you? Did you know she was my mother when you started dating her?" Mark's face paled, his mouth opening and closing before he managed. I found out later." The hesitation was enough to confirm Ethan's fears. This wasn't a coincidence. Mark had known, and he'd chosen to stay silent. The betrayal cut deeper than Diane's cruelty ever had. Liam leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "So, what's the real story here? Because this doesn't add up." Diane shot him a venomous look, but Liam didn't back down. He'd faced worse than her in foster homes, and he wasn't about to let her intimidate him now. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude for Liam's strength, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. Mark cleared his throat, stepping closer to Diane as if to shield her. "It's complicated, Ethan. I didn't mean for this to happen. I met Diane after you, and I stopped working together. She needed help, and I thought I could." He stopped, as if realizing he'd said too much. Ethan's heart raced. Help. Diane didn't need help, she needed control, and Mark was just another pawn in her game. The conversation spiraled, Diane's voice rising as she accused Ethan of abandoning her, of being ungrateful, of choosing that lifestyle over family. Ethan's hands shook, the old wounds reopening, but Liam's steady presence kept him grounded. "You don't get to rewrite history," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "You made my life hell. You don't get to play the victim now." Mark stepped forward, his hands raised as if to calm the storm. "Ethan, I know this is hard, but your mother's trying. She's been through a lot, too." The words were a knife, twisting in Ethan's chest. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "Don't you dare defend her. You of all people should know what she did to me." The room fell silent, the weight of Ethan's words hanging heavy. Diane's face twisted, a mix of rage and something else, guilt, maybe, or shame. Mark looked away, unable to meet Ethan's gaze. Liam stood too, his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Let's go," he said softly. "You don't need this." But Ethan wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. He needed answers, needed to understand why Mark, the man who'd helped him rebuild, was now standing beside the woman who'd torn him apart. "Why, Mark?" he asked, his voice raw. "Why her? After everything I told you." Mark's silence was answer enough. Ethan turned to leave, Liam's hand guiding him toward the door. But Diane's voice stopped him cold. "You think you're better than me, Ethan? You think you can just walk away again?" Her words were a challenge, a dare to stay and face the truth. Ethan turned back, his eyes locking with hers. "I'm not running this time," he said. "But I'm not here for you. I'm here for me." With that, he stepped outside, the cool night air a balm against the heat of his anger. Liam followed, and as the door closed behind them, Ethan knew this was far from over. The truth was out there, buried in Mark's silence and Diane's lies, and he'd tear it apart to find it. The motel room was small, its walls papered in faded florals, the air thick with the scent of cheap air freshener. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped tightly, staring at the worn carpet as if it held answers. Liam paced, his boots scuffing the floor, his frustration a mirror to Ethan's own. "She's playing a game," Liam said, his voice low. "And Mark's in on it, whether he wants to be or not." Ethan nodded, his mind replaying the confrontation. Mark's evasiveness, Diane's calculated cruelty, it all felt like a trap, one he'd walked into willingly. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old emails from his therapy days. Mark's signature was there, professional and detached, a stark contrast to the man he'd seen tonight. He knew, Ethan said, his voice hollow. He had to know who she was from the start. Liam stopped pacing, sitting beside Ethan and resting a hand on his back. "What do you want to do? We can leave right now. Go back to Philly. Forget this whole mess." But Ethan shook his head. Leaving felt like surrender, and he was done running from Diane's shadow. He needed to understand Mark's role, to know if the man who'd saved him had betrayed him. The next morning, Ethan drove to the local library, a squat brick building where he'd spent hours as a teenager escaping Diane's wrath. The librarian, Mrs. Carter, still recognized him, her smile warm but tinged with pity. "You're back," she said softly. Ethan forced a smile, asking for access to the public computers. He needed information, anything, to connect Mark and Diane before tonight's confrontation. Hours passed as Ethan dug through online records, social media, anything that might explain Mark's presence in Diane's life. Liam sat beside him, scrolling on his own phone, occasionally nudging Ethan with a quiet joke to ease the tension. Then, a breakthrough, a local newspaper article from 2 years ago, mentioning a community mental health workshop led by Dr. Mark Reynolds. Diane's name was listed among the attendees. Ethan's pulse quickened. This was no chance encounter, they'd crossed paths long before Mark claimed. "Check this out," Ethan said, showing Liam the article. Liam's eyes narrowed. So he lied. He knew her back then. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. Why would Mark hide that? Was he protecting Diane? Or himself? The questions gnawed Ethan, each one a thread pulling him deeper into the mystery. That afternoon, Ethan called Mark, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. "We need to talk." "Alone?" Mark hesitated, then agreed to meet at a park on the edge of town. Ethan hung up, his resolve hardening. Liam insisted on coming, his protective streak unyielding, but Ethan asked him to stay behind. "I need to do this myself," he said. Liam's jaw tightened, but he nodded, pulling Ethan into a fierce hug. "You're not alone. Okay. I'm right here." The park was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. Mark was already there, sitting on a bench, his posture stiff. Ethan approached, his heart pounding but his steps sure. "No more lies," Ethan said, sitting beside him. "How long have you known her?" Mark sighed, his hands clasped tightly. "I met Diane at a workshop 2 years ago. She was struggling. I offered to help, pro bono. It wasn't supposed to become personal." Ethan's chest tightened. "But it did. And you didn't tell me." Mark looked away, guilt etched into his features. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could help her without it affecting you." Ethan laughed, a bitter sound. "You thought wrong. She's toxic, Mark. You know that better than anyone." Mark's silence was deafening, and Ethan pressed harder. "Did you tell her about me? About our sessions?" Mark's eyes widened, a flicker of panic. "No." Never. I'd never breach confidentiality. But the doubt lingered, a seed planted by Diane's knowing smirk. As the sun dipped lower, Mark's story unraveled. He'd been drawn to Diane's charisma, her vulnerability a mirror to his own need to fix broken things. But her darkness had crept in, manipulating his compassion, twisting it into something he couldn't escape. "I'm sorry, Ethan," Mark said, his voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you." Ethan stood, his anger tempered by pity. Mark wasn't the villain, but he wasn't innocent either. "Stay away from her," Ethan said. "And stay away from me." He walked away, the weight of the truth settling over him. Diane had poisoned another part of his life, but this time, he wouldn't let her win. Back at the motel, Liam was waiting, his relief palpable as Ethan recounted the conversation. "What now?" Liam asked. Ethan took a deep breath, his resolve clear. "We go back to her house. I need to confront her, once and for all." Liam nodded, his hand finding Ethan's. "Together," he said. Ethan smiled, the warmth of Liam's love a shield against the storm ahead. The air in Diane's house was thick with unspoken accusations as Ethan and Liam stepped inside. Diane sat at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in her hand, her eyes glinting with a mix of defiance and desperation. Mark was nowhere to be seen, and Ethan was glad for it. This was between him and his mother, a final stand to reclaim his peace. "You're back," Diane said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Couldn't stay away, could you?" Ethan ignored the bait, sitting across from her, Liam standing protectively behind him. "I'm not here for you," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I'm here to end this." Diane's laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension. "And what?" "Your little rebellion. You think you can just erase me, Ethan." Her words were a weapon, but Ethan was done bleeding. "You erased yourself," he said. "You chose hate over love, control over family. I'm not your punching bag anymore." Liam's hand rested on Ethan's shoulder, a silent reminder of his strength. Diane's gaze flicked to Liam, her lip curling. "And you brought him? Your boyfriend?" The word was a sneer, but Liam didn't flinch. "Yeah," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "I'm here. Deal with it." The confrontation escalated, Diane's voice rising as she hurled accusations Ethan was selfish, ungrateful, a disappointment. Each word was a ghost of the past, but Ethan refused to let them haunt him. "You don't get to define me," he said, his voice breaking through her tirade. "You never did." Diane's face twisted, her composure cracking. "You think you're so perfect now, don't you? With your new life, your new love. But you'll always be my son, and you'll always carry my scars." Ethan's chest ached, but he held her gaze. "I carry them," he said. "But they don't own me. Not anymore." The room fell silent, the weight of Ethan's words settling like dust. Diane's eyes glistened, but whether it was from anger or regret, Ethan couldn't tell. He didn't care. He'd come to say his piece, to lay the past to rest. But one question lingered, burning in his chest. "Why Mark?" he asked. "Why him, of all people?" Diane's expression shifted, a flicker of something calculating. "He understands me," she said. "Unlike you." The answer was a dodge, and Ethan's frustration flared. "He was my therapist, Mom. You knew that. Was this some kind of game to you? A way to hurt me?" Diane's silence was answer enough. Ethan stood, his heart heavy but resolute. "I'm done," he said. "You don't get to hurt me anymore." He turned to leave, Liam's hand in his, but Diane's voice stopped him. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You'll see." Outside, the night air was cool, the stars bright above Willow Creek. Ethan leaned against Liam, the weight of the confrontation draining him. "You okay?" Liam asked, his voice soft. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure. The truth about Mark and Diane was still murky, but he'd faced his mother and walked away whole. That was enough for now. Back at the motel, Ethan couldn't sleep, his mind racing with questions. Was Diane manipulating Mark, or was Mark complicit? The thought of his former therapist, the man who'd helped him heal, being ensnared by Diane's toxicity was unbearable. He needed answers, and he knew where to find them. The next day, Ethan and Liam drove to Mark's office in a neighboring town, a small practice tucked above a bookstore. Mark was there, his face drawn as he let them in. "I didn't expect you," he said, his voice tired. Ethan didn't waste time. "Tell me the truth," he said. "All of it." Mark's story poured out, a mix of shame and regret. He'd met Diane at the workshop, drawn to her pain but blind to her manipulation. When he realized her connection to Ethan, he tried to pull away, but Diane had a way of burrowing into people's lives. "I thought I could help her," Mark said. "I was wrong." Ethan listened, his anger softening into something sadder. Mark wasn't a villain, just a man who'd made mistakes. "You need to end it," Ethan said. "For your sake, not mine." Mark nodded, his eyes heavy with understanding. As Ethan and Liam left, Ethan felt a weight lift. The truth wasn't clean, but it was his to carry now, not Diane's. Back in Philadelphia, the city's noise was a comfort, a stark contrast to Willow Creek's oppressive silence. Ethan and Liam settled into their apartment, a small but cozy space filled with plants and mismatched furniture. The confrontation with Diane lingered, but Ethan felt lighter, as if he'd shed a layer of the past. Liam, ever the optimist, suggested a movie night to reset, but Ethan's mind was still on Mark. He pulled out his laptop, digging deeper into Diane's life. Social media posts, local news archives, anything that might reveal more about her connection to Mark. What he found chilled him, a photo from a year ago. Diane and Mark at a charity gala, her arm looped possessively through his. The caption mentioned their shared passion for mental health advocacy. Ethan's stomach twisted. Diane wasn't just manipulating Mark, she was using his work, his reputation, to bolster her own image. Liam leaned over, his brow furrowing at the screen. "She's building a whole narrative," he said, "making herself look like some kind of savior." Ethan nodded, his anger reigniting. Diane had always been good at playing the victim, twisting the truth to suit her needs. But this felt different, more calculated. Was she using Mark to get to him, or was there something bigger at play? Ethan called an old friend, Sarah, a social worker who'd known Diane through community events. Over coffee, Sarah's face darkened as Ethan explained the situation. "Your mom's been cozying up to a lot of influential people," Sarah said. "She's on the board of a mental health nonprofit now. Mark's involved, too." Ethan's heart sank. Diane wasn't just in Mark's life, she was infiltrating his world, the one place Ethan had found solace. That night, Ethan and Liam talked strategy. Confronting Diane again felt futile, but staying silent wasn't an option. "We need to warn Mark," Liam said. "He's in over his head." Ethan agreed, but doubt gnawed at him. Could Mark be saved? Or was he too far gone? The thought of losing the man who'd helped him heal was a fresh wound. But Ethan refused to let Diane win. They arranged another meeting with Mark, this time at a neutral Spoda quiet cafe in Philly. Mark looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed with stress. "I'm trying to end things with her," he said before Ethan could speak. "But it's not that simple. She's intense." Ethan's sympathy battled his frustration. "She's using you," he said. "She's using your name, your work, to make herself look good. You need to cut her off." Mark's shoulders slumped, his guilt palpable. "I know. I thought I could fix her." Ethan's heart ached at the words, so close to his own childhood hopes. "You can't fix someone who doesn't want to change," he said softly. "Trust me, I tried." The conversation shifted to Diane's nonprofit work, and Mark's unease grew. He hadn't known the extent of her involvement, the way she'd leveraged his credentials to gain trust. Ethan showed him the gala photo, the social media posts, the carefully crafted image of Diane as a reformed, compassionate figure. Mark's face hardened. "I'll end it," he said. "For good." As they left the cafe, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Mark was waking up, seeing Diane for what she was. But the victory was bittersweet. Diane's reach was long, her influence insidious. Ethan knew she wouldn't let go easily, and the thought of her retaliation sent a chill down his spine. Back home, Liam pulled Ethan into a hug, his warmth a balm against the uncertainty. "You did good," he said. "You're stronger than she'll ever be." Ethan clung to him, the weight of the fight settling over him. He'd faced Diane, confronted Mark, and reclaimed a piece of himself. But the battle wasn't over. Diane was still out there, and Ethan knew she'd come for him again. Weeks passed, and the quiet was unsettling. Ethan waited for Diane's next move, but her silence was louder than her screams had ever been. He threw himself into work, a graphic design job that gave him purpose, while Liam kept the apartment filled with laughter and late-night talks. But the shadow of Diane lingered, a specter Ethan couldn't shake. Then, a letter arrived, the handwriting unmistakably Diane's. Ethan's hands shook as he opened it, Liam hovering nearby. Inside was a single page, her words sharp and deliberate. "You think you've won, but you'll never escape me. Mark's gone, but I'm not. Come to the gala next month. Let's finish this." Attached was an invitation to the nonprofit's annual fundraiser, Diane's name listed as a keynote speaker. Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a taunt, it was a challenge, a public stage for Diane to reclaim control. Liam read the letter, his jaw tight. "She's baiting you," he said. "Don't go." But Ethan's mind was already racing. This was his chance to expose her, to show the world who she really was. He couldn't run anymore. They spent days researching, piecing together Diane's rise in the nonprofit world. She'd used Mark's credentials to gain credibility, but there were whispers of financial discrepancies, hushed complaints about her domineering style. Ethan reached out to Sarah again, who confirmed the rumors. "She's got everyone fooled," Sarah said. "But people are starting to ask questions." Ethan and Liam devised a plan. They'd attend the gala, not to confront Diane directly, but to gather evidence, to talk to others who'd seen her true colors. It was risky. Diane thrived in crowds, her charm a weapon, but Ethan was done hiding. He wanted closure, not just for himself, but for everyone she'd hurt. The night of the gala, the venue was a glittering contrast to Willow Creek's drabness. Ethan and Liam, dressed in sharp suits, blended into the crowd of donors and activists. Diane was on stage, her voice smooth as she spoke about mental health and redemption. Ethan's stomach churned at the hypocrisy, but he kept his focus, scanning the room for allies. They found one in Claire, a former board member who'd resigned after clashing with Diane. Over drinks, Claire spilled everything: Diane's bullying, her questionable use of funds, her obsession with control. "She's dangerous," Claire whispered. But no one stood up to her. Not yet. Ethan's resolve hardened. He would. As Diane's speech ended, Ethan approached her, Liam at his side. The crowd parted, their eyes on the mother and son locked in a silent standoff. "You don't belong here," Diane said, her smile tight. Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "Neither do you. Not after what you've done." The words hung in the air, drawing curious glances. Ethan didn't elaborate, he didn't need to. The seeds of doubt were planted, and he knew Claire and others would water them. Diane's face paled, but she recovered quickly, turning to charm the crowd. Ethan and Liam left, the night air cool against their flushed faces. They'd struck a blow, but the war wasn't over. Back home, Ethan felt a shift. He'd faced Diane on her turf and walked away stronger. Liam pulled him close, their foreheads touching. "You're incredible," Liam said. Ethan smiled, the weight of his past lighter than ever. But Diane's letter burned in his mind. She wasn't done, and neither was he. The fallout came faster than Ethan expected. A week after the gala, articles began surfacing, local blogs at first, then larger outlets, questioning Diane's leadership of the nonprofit. Claire had been busy, rallying former colleagues to speak out. Financial records were leaked, showing questionable transfers, and Diane's carefully crafted image began to crack. Ethan followed the news obsessively, torn between relief and dread. Diane's silence was ominous, a calm before the storm. Liam urged him to let it go, to focus on their life together, but Ethan couldn't. Not until Diane was truly out of his life. Then, a call from Mark. His voice was strained, almost panicked. "She's coming for you, Ethan. She's furious about the gala, about the articles. She thinks you're behind it." Ethan's heart raced, but he wasn't surprised. Diane thrived on revenge, and he'd just painted a target on his back. Mark offered to meet, to explain everything. Against Liam's protests, Ethan agreed, driven by a need to close this chapter. They met at a park, Mark's face haggard, his hands trembling. "I ended things with her," he said. "But she's not letting go. She's obsessed with proving she's better than you." Mark revealed the depth of Diane's manipulation, how she'd used his therapy notes, not directly, but through careful questions, to learn about Ethan's vulnerabilities. She'd targeted Mark deliberately, knowing his connection to Ethan, to reassert her control. Ethan's anger flared, but so did his pity. Mark was a victim, too, caught in Diane's web. "I'm done with her," Mark said. "And I'm stepping away from the nonprofit. I'll testify if it comes to that." Ethan nodded, grateful but wary. Mark's remorse was genuine, but it couldn't erase the betrayal. "Just stay out of my life," Ethan said, his voice firm. Mark nodded, his eyes heavy with regret. Back home, Ethan and Liam prepared for Diane's next move. They changed their locks, updated their security, and reached out to a lawyer friend for advice. The nonprofit's board was investigating, and Diane's influence was crumbling, but Ethan knew she wouldn't go quietly. She never had. One night, a knock at their door startled them. Ethan's heart pounded as he opened it, half expecting Diane. Instead, it was Sarah, her face grim. She's gone, Sarah said. Left town. No one knows where. Ethan's relief was tempered by unease. Diane didn't run, she fought. Her disappearance felt like a strategy, not a surrender. As weeks turned to months, the storm quieted. The nonprofit dissolved under scrutiny, and Diane's name faded from the headlines. Ethan and Liam settled into a new rhythm, their love stronger for the battles they'd faced. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Diane was still out there, waiting for her moment. A year later, Ethan stood on the balcony of their new apartment, the Philadelphia skyline glittering below. Liam joined him, a mug of coffee in hand, his smile warm. "You okay?" he asked, his voice a familiar comfort. Ethan nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Diane's shadow still lingered, but it no longer defined him. The nonprofit scandal had faded, its board members distancing themselves from Diane's legacy. Mark had moved to another state, starting fresh. His apology a quiet note Ethan kept but never answered. Diane's whereabouts were unknown, her silence a gift Ethan hadn't expected. He'd braced for her return, but as time passed, he began to believe she was truly gone. Ethan had grown, too. Therapy with a new counselor helped him process the lingering pain, and his work flourished, his designs earning praise. Liam's garage was thriving, his laughter a constant in their home. They'd built a life together, one rooted in love and resilience, not fear. One evening, a package arrived, no return address. Inside was a single photo, a younger Diane, holding a toddler Ethan, her smile genuine, untouched by the bitterness that would come. A note was tucked beneath, "I'm sorry. I wasn't enough." Ethan stared at it, his throat tight. Was this Diane's final act? A plea for forgiveness? Or another manipulation? He'd never know, and for the first time, he didn't care. He showed the photo to Liam, who studied it quietly. "What do you want to do with it?" Liam asked. Ethan hesitated, then tucked it into a drawer. "Keep it," he said. "Not for her, but for me. To remember I survived." That night, they hosted a small dinner with friends, their apartment filled with laughter and warmth. Ethan watched Liam, his heart swelling with gratitude. Diane had tried to break him, but she'd failed. Love had one love for Liam, for himself, for the life they'd built from the ashes of his past. As the stars appeared above the city, Ethan took Liam's hand, their fingers intertwining. The scars were still there, but they were part of a story he'd rewritten. He wasn't Diane's son anymore, was Ethan, whole and free, standing beside the man who'd helped him find his way. The past was gone, and the future was theirs.